Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Over at ESPN.com, they have Matt Miller has one of their draft analysts has a piece up right now where he essentially looks at all of the first-round draft picks, each team's first-round slot, and says, what is the biggest need at that spot, and makes a pick. And then he looks at what's the best value at that spot, and makes a pick. And I'm not gonna tease you or bury the lead or anything like that. So for the Saints, if you look at the projected, the biggest need, he has the Saints taking Myles Murphy, the defensive end from Clemson. As far as the best value, Brian Breesy, the defensive tackle from Clemson, still on the board. He said that would be the best value. Either way, he's got the Saints addressing defensive line at both need and value at that spot. Now, need is undeniable. We've talked about it a ton. The Saints need interior defensive players. Value could come in a lot of different ways. The bigger question isn't what's on the board at that time. It's, in this particular draft, how are the Saints approaching the draft with the 29th pick? Is it need or is it value? And that varies. Here's what I mean. People always ask, hey, do you draft need or do you draft best available? Sometimes it's best available at position of need. But really for the Saints, what their history has shown us is it depends on the year. For example, last year, the Saints had 2 first-round picks. They took Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. Let me remind you, the Saints signed Jarvis Landry in free agency, and they had Michael Thomas coming back off of injury. The Saints did not need a first-round draft pick wide receiver. Now, we saw the injuries that happened to both Jarvis and Michael Thomas. Understand, how it played out. But on draft day, you didn't need a wide receiver. That was a luxury at that point. But they took the guy they felt was the best receiver in the draft, where they did. You took Trevor Penning. Your starting 5 on the offensive line was back. You didn't need a starting offensive lineman to come in. They didn't even really have Trevor Penning for last year because of injury. You didn't need him. But you saw great value, so you drafted value at that spot. 2021, Saints took Peyton Turner late in round 1. You had Cam Jordan. You had Marcus Davenport. You had Carl Granderson. You didn't need a defensive end. You took who you felt was the best available player at that position. They thought that, now look, we have the benefit of hindsight now looking at Peyton Turner, 2 injury-plagued seasons where he hasn't done anything. But that wasn't drafting need. That was drafting what they thought was the best player on the board at the time. Flip side of it, the previous 2 drafts, the Saints used their first pick on offensive linemen. In 2020, it was Cesar Ruiz, and in 2019, it was Eric McCoy. They needed offensive linemen. That wasn't even debatable. When they took Ruiz, a lot of people looked and said, why are you taking Cesar Ruiz? Why are you taking an offensive lineman? Everybody wanted a linebacker. A lot of people here wanted Patrick Queen in that spot. They took the offensive lineman. Well, we found out the next week because they cut Larry Warford. They cut Larry Warford in a cap-saving move, and, days after the draft, and we figured out why. Oh, okay, that's why they took Cesar Ruiz, because they were getting rid of Warford in his big contract, and he was plug and play. Okay, I get it. Eric McCoy, remember, Max Unger suddenly retired. You had to get a center, so they drafted Eric McCoy. They didn't have a first-round pick, used their second-round pick. That was a need. You didn't have an option. You were drafting a center right there. 2018, they traded up to get Marcus Davenport. They didn't need a defensive end. They saw a guy that they had highly graded falling in the draft, so they got aggressive and went and got him. I could look at 2017. Marshawn Lattimore. They were taking Lattimore. Sean Payton said this on the record. They had Lattimore and Patrick Mahomes, both graded in their top 5. And they're sitting there at 11 knowing we're going to get either one of these guys. So they stayed pat. KC jumped him, took Mahomes. They took Lattimore. They got who they felt was the best cornerback in the draft at 11. They felt they were over the moon. value. In that same draft, they took Ryan Ramczyk at the end of round 1. They didn't need a right tackle. Zach Strief was their starting right tackle. Now, Strief got injured in that training camp and never played again. And Ramczyk's been your bookend right tackle. Has been awesome. He's been an anchor. But you didn't need him. You just had him graded as the best tackle in that draft, and he was sitting there at 32. You're like, taking that guy. Okay. Need, not or value, not need. Alvin Kamara, round 3, that same draft. The Saints had Mark Ingram, and they signed Adrian Peterson in free agency. They didn't need a running back, but they saw Alvin Kamara sitting right there. They went, got to get that guy. Value. So the Saints have shown you over their history, they draft value more than anything. They're going to take the best player at any position that's on the board. A year ago when they took Alontae Taylor, y'all, they didn't need Alontae Taylor. You had Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo coming back. You didn't need Alontae Taylor. Remember this before they traded C.V. Deuce. You didn't need Alontae Taylor. You didn't need a cornerback. But they're sitting there around 2 and went, that's a dude. Got to have him. And now that made it easier when Adebo got hurt, when you traded Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, because you had that dude. But that was value. The Saints draft value. Unless they have a glaring need. When Max Unger retired, they needed a center. They got Eric McCoy. When they drafted Cesar Ruiz, it was because they knew they were cutting Larry Warford the next week. The Saints knew that. And they needed an offensive lineman. Now, we all thought Ruiz would play center, McCoy would kick out, but it was Breeze's last season. He didn't want to rotate a center again for the 3rd consecutive year, so they left Goodwell alone. McCoy stayed at center. Ruiz played guard. We all know how it's played out, but the point is they knew they were getting rid of Larry Warford, and they needed a starting caliber offensive lineman, and they got one in the draft. This year, the Saints need interior defensive linemen. Like, that's not a want. That's not a luxury. That is an absolute must-have need. I'm going to say it over and over again. I can look at the Saints' history and know what they are looking at the top of this draft, and that is interior defensive linemen. The Saints draft, look, I just ran through it. Peyton Turner, Cesar Ruiz, Eric McCoy, Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Davenport. The Saints draft linemen anyway. I'm good with that. Build through the trenches. But you got to draft interior. Because right now, the 2 free agent acquisitions you have on the defensive line doesn't even replace the 3 interior players you've lost to free agency. So you would better go and draft with that first pick an interior defensive lineman. That is your need, and that's what I expect they're going to do. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.